Gloria Browne-Marshall. She's a professor of constitutional law, an author, and a civil rights attorney. Gloria, let me just start by getting your key takeaways today from what we heard from these opening statements.
Well, it's a tale of two cities in which you have one side saying that the officer was reckless and should have known that he would lead to injury in the death of George Floyd by keeping his knee on him, and that there was no reason for him to do that. Under the Constitution, the Supreme Court has said that an officer only uses deadly force when an officer meets deadly force. And then you have the other side, the defense, saying, well, George Floyd had all of these health issues, and so therefore the health issues caused his death, not the knee on his neck. Which, of course, begs the question, he would still be alive with health issues if the knee had not been on his neck. But I do think the strongest defense argument is that he was trained to act in this way. And so that puts not just the officer on trial, but also the police department itself and its policies.
Yeah. What's going to be the challenge for the prosecution, Gloria? Because we know historically these cases involving police officers are incredibly hard to convict.
Yes, because police officers in this country are not just seen as public servants like teachers and social workers. They're seen almost with celebrity status, and so they have this gloss, almost Teflon. So there are so few trials, as was pointed out before, and even fewer convictions when you think over 1,000 people die at the hands of police every year, and yet we have just a handful of cases in which prosecutors actually bring a case. I think the prosecutor's office is also on trial because it's been seen at fault, and the reason why police officers have been so reckless in their behavior and so brutal in their policing is because the prosecutors' offices across the country have failed to prosecute. And so, without national criminal justice reform, you can't have individual prosecutors' offices and individual police departments making change. We have 18,000 police departments, and so we have to have a national criminal justice reform. Without that, even with George Floyd's trial ending with a victory for the victim, George Floyd and his family, there would still need to be all of these changes made across the board.
Gloria, I want to squeeze in one more question before we have to wrap. And we heard the defense talking about how these were legal maneuvers that essentially Derek Chauvin was following protocol. Just because these were legal maneuvers doesn't mean they're not lethal maneuvers. We've seen the ban of chokeholds and neck restraints in the wake of Floyd's death. Do you think that that'll influence the jury at all, knowing that these are probably not tactics that should be used in the first place?
Well, that and the fact that even if it's legal to use a chokehold, you only use a chokehold, you use any of these things to the point where the person is submissive. And we see it with our own eyes that George Floyd was submissive at this time. So when do you stop choking? When do you stop kneeling? When do you stop using these devices that they've been trained to use to subdue somebody once they're subdued? Because if they go past the point of being subdued, they will end in death. And so I think that logic has to be brought out by the prosecution as well.
There is a feeling here, Gloria, that especially among local activists and protesters and organizers of different movements that I've spoken with, that justice will not be served in this case. What are your thoughts in terms of getting a conviction on any of these charges?
Well, I have been writing about these issues. I've been watching them. I've been talking about them as a legal expert for decades. And what we find is there's a credibility that's given to police officers that a civilian in the same situation would not receive. And that's why, with a prosecutor's offices that fail to prosecute so often, I'm skeptical as well. And even if we have a conviction in this one case, remember 1,000 people a year die in the hands of police. So one case out of 1,000 is still not a situation that is something that we call justice in this country, or any democracy should call justice.
Gloria Browne-Marshall.